to another episode of Page Turner. Today is Wednesday, February 3rd. I am joined with Kevin and Shane. How are you guys doing? How's your week going?
Karen, always a pleasure. It's going well. Thanks.
Doing okay. Hanging in there.
Yep. Just another day. Here we are in
February.
Yesterday was Groundhog Day, which is why when Kevin and I went to lunch yesterday, the restaurant had the Groundhog movie going, went right over my head. Kevin said, "Hey, look, they're playing Groundhog Day."
The correct answer is it was the Presentation of the Lord Day.
Also known as Candlemas, 40 days after Christmas.
That's right, Candlemas. Candlemas. Well, what is that? Isn't that in the Catholic churches, Orthodox churches, they bring all their candles that they're going to use for the year?
Yeah, they bring them all out, and in the Anglican church, they have a whole big service. They fill up the church with candles. It's beautiful.
Oh, that's right. And I think in the Anglican church, and I think it's because on the Feast of the Presentation, Mary brings Jesus into the temple, which was required, I think. It was a requirement of the law to consecrate your firstborn. It was actually an act of sacrifice. And so she brought the light of the world into the temple. And therefore you bring your candles in as light. I didn't even think about that, but there you go. Things I never thought we would discuss.
That's right.
This is what happens when you improvise.
Also, the rodent that can divine how much long the meteorological rodent is a groundhog a rodent? No, it's a mammal, I guess. Well, I guess that's.
I think it's a rodent.
Are they marsupial? What? I don't even know. Groundhog.
Yeah, right.
We trust a groundhog.
Well, it's just interesting, all these holy days of the year we associate with like little caricatured animals. Easter, the day of the resurrection, bunnies. Christmas Day, Santa. The Feast of the Presentation of the Lord, Groundhog. What's up with that?
Well, so did I haven't heard, what did he predict? Did he see a shadow or not? The whole, if he sees a shadow.
People were saying 6 more weeks of winter. I don't know if that means he did or didn't see it. I don't know.
I've got an idea that March 21st will be the first official day of spring this year.
You think so this year?
I do. I think it'll be on the 21st of March this year. And Easter's on a Sunday this year.
Shocking. Well, and speaking of days, so Super Bowl Sunday is coming up this Sunday. Are you guys?
Another great feast
There's
day of the
another
church.
one. There's another like a groundhog. We take a holy day and we denigrate it.
Do you have a team? Are you rooting for the Chiefs or the Buccaneers?
Honestly, I didn't even know who was in the Super Bowl. I have been so disconnected from sports lately. I will say this. I do know now that Kansas City, they're in the Super Bowl. And Tom Brady is at the Buccaneers.
Yep.
We all, whether you like Tom Brady or not, I just got to say, that's phenomenal. I mean, he goes to a new team and brings them to the Super Bowl. I mean, I think that's like the GOAT, right? Greatest of all time. But since my family hails from Kansas, I will hope that the Kansas City Chiefs prevail.
Kevin, you have a team?
No.
Okay.
Because I'm all about the snacks. I like the snacks. We end up watching the dog or the puppy bowl or something. The kids like to watch that.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to love dinner that was nothing but snacks and hors d'oeuvres.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that. So little sandwiches, you go to some little party and little sandwiches and bacon and yeah.
The little
hot dogs. Yeah, little hot dogs.
Pigs in a blanket.
Yes.
Yeah. Crock pots full of those sausages.
I love finger food. Yeah.
Our neighbor always has a Super Bowl party for us in the neighborhood, but this will be the first time that we don't go in probably 12 years. So it's a little weird. And then I always just go to watch the commercials, of course, and the halftime show. And I don't even, it's the band is called The Weeknd that is playing the halftime show. They've got that popular song on TikTok, Blinded by the Light or something. So
not the one that Shane. It's not the one from the 60s.
Yeah, not that one.
Okay. And
But it's just like, it's depressing because you feel so old. You don't even know who the band is that's playing in the Super Bowl. Like,
It'll never be better than the halftime show where Stevie Wonder drove. Remember that? He drove a car.
no.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that? You should look that up. It was
Yeah.
like everybody's like, what?
You mean like he drove it into the field, no kidding.
I don't know if he drove it or he drove it. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we better get to the subject, everybody.
Yes, let's get back to the meat of why we're talking today. And this is episode number 35. I was prepared.
Right.
So episode 35, we wanted to continue our discussion of the Apprenticeship with Jesus book by Gary Moon. Shane, you just had your third sermon. Was it your third or your second?
It was my third, yeah.
Okay, third sermon. And the basic premise of the sermon is basically your last line that said, don't be conformed to this world, is kind of what I got out of it. And
Well, that's right out of Romans chapter 12. So good for you, Karen.
thank you.
Think about my creativity to say something like that, a direct quote from the Bible.
But you had some really, really good analogies in your sermon this week about, YOLO, you only live once. Jesus would never say that, there's more than one life. And, just the crowd analogy of everybody running towards the cliff and the one person going the other way. And that, if you're not conforming, you're crazy, you're different, you're like you said, the counterculture nature of Christianity. So,
Yes, and I think that's something that we need to revitalize among ourselves within the church. We've got to leave what I would call the civic religion that was especially predominant in the World War II generation. And there are reasons for this, and I don't want to sound like I'm denigrating all that. But there came to be a kind of convergence between the American ethos at the time and the Christian religion itself, as if the two go together like chocolate and peanut butter. Sorry for that. That to be a good Christian was to be a good American. A good American was to be a good Christian. Well, there are some touching points, I would say, with the kind of American ethos, and that's attributable to, I think, the Christian past. Wasn't thoroughly Christian, but there's a lot of vestiges of Christianity, especially Calvinism, in the writing of the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution. But the New Testament does not envision the church as such to blend right in with the dominant culture. The New Testament refers to Christians as strangers, aliens. We are a counterculture. I think also of Revelation 18, where John, the writer, says to the churches through the angel, come out of Babylon, come out of Babylon, come out of her. We would say equivalent would be opt out of what Babylon is doing. So we really need to re-emphasize that the church lives by a different alternative set of politics, the politics of Jesus and his way. There may be some moments when the way of Christ can converge a little bit with the dominant culture, but by and large, it is going in the opposite direction. I quoted G.K. Chesterton, and then I'll be quiet for this, in my sermon, but he said something else that I really love. He says that dead things always flow with the stream. Only living things can swim against it. And as Christians, we're to be the living things that swim against the stream. Loving your enemies, everybody, is never going to be acceptable to the dominant culture. But we're called to do that.
Interesting. When you were just talking about the stream in the book, Gary talks about he's had several baptisms, and he talks about the one he kind of daydreamed with Jesus. And he's in the river with Jesus, and he's saying in his mind that down the stream is your past, and there's no need to revisit and worry about your past. Your future is upstream, but you don't need to swim upstream. It's going to come to you and to live in the present. And so when you just said stream, that's what kind of tied in with that. But I think it's so hard for us in our daily lives, our daily grind, our busyness, to be that different fish and to swim upstream or away from the pack. And I think, I mean, that's the struggle that we all face every day, is how to be different. It's not easy. You know, no one wants to be that odd duck.
Yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
Be the odd duck.
Speaking of odd ducks, I'll speak now. Yeah, I think you're right. But I was just remembering that story too, Karen, about standing in the stream and allowing things, but how much effort it takes to go upstream. It's you have to think about it. You have to plan those movements so that you don't get taken away by the currents. It's interesting. My daughter's in confirmation now, and I guess they talked about the early church this week, Shane, and talking about how the church gets co-opted by the state. And I reminded her that there are some people that think that when Constantine, the emperor, converted to Christianity, it was sort of the beginning of that convergence that you're talking about, because suddenly it became very politically expedient to be aligned with the church. And we see it all throughout, Christian history. John Wesley went to, his missionaries went to India under the protection of the British flag, on those ships. So
yes, and what they ended up doing, and not to cut you off, they went to preach the gospel, but what they often did, without really knowing it or intending it, they just evangelized British culture.
Right.
Yeah. But finish your point.
Yeah, that came through it. And I think we just have to be, mindful of that. Like you said, Karen, it takes a lot of effort and work.
Well, I would say not so much the Constantinian area. I mean, I think there's an argument to be had there. And some of the great thinkers like a John Howard Yoder, the preeminent theologians about that point, would say, yeah, that's where the epicenter was. I would also argue it really started happening in the Enlightenment period, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, where you had nation state, this entity called the nation state, beginning to emerge globally. And as the nations began to expand their territory, the church was always in the way. And you had these Enlightenment thinkers saying, well, and a lot of it's attributable to Martin Luther and his understanding of faith. Well, the church and religion, that's a spiritual thing. And the state politics, that's a public thing. Well, just keep your religious beliefs to yourself, and you can be a good Christian on the inside and conform to the culture on the outside, and everything's fine. And I think we have pretty much co-opted, to use your word. We've assimilated that, and we think that it's fine. So we can be loving and charitable within and be like everybody else from without. That goes back to the Enlightenment. That does not necessarily go back to the Constantinian era.
But don't we, I mean, when you look at today, we kind of want the church and the state separate, right? I mean,
because it's convenient for the most part, but I am not saying we need to be theocracy where the church is in charge. That happened in Britain. We, as Americans, I think they got that right. We should not have state legislated religion. But again, we talked about this at an earlier podcast. Jesus had his own politics that got him killed. And it wasn't because he was spiritual. It's not like Pontius Pilate said, love one another. Man, I'm not going to have any of that. To the cross. I mean, that's not what it was about. It was that Jesus really was a threat to the social order. And this is the reason, listeners, that I think there are 50 countries now, I could be wrong, about 50 countries where Christianity is outlawed. It is against the law. Well, there's a reason for that, because it impinges upon the power structure of those countries as a kind of threat.
Okay, but here's something that contradicts kind of the point. So we're saying, don't imitate, be your own person, be like Jesus, and go be the odd one out. Mm-hmm. But yet at the same time, we want everybody to be, we want more of the odd ones out, right? So then we all become imitating again of the odd ones out. Like, You know what I'm saying? Like, are we now going against what we're saying right now to do the other way?
We're imitating Christ at all things.
Yeah.
We're imitating Christ. This is really why it's so key, and I said this in the sermon, to live Christ-like out there publicly, because it's in our very witness, difference in our very witness, that can draw people into the beauty of the faith. Because really, if you live the Christian life robustly, it's a beautiful way to live. I mean, it's beautiful. Well, we have a natural predisposition for the beautiful. And, you know, when you read the lives of the saints, the thing that you will be struck by is just how beautiful their lives were. They may have lived in poverty, but wow, they were beautiful. I mean, they had harmony to themselves. You know, beauty is diversity, harmonious. It's harmonious diversity. And here are these saints who were beautiful because there was an order about them as well. The church really has the vocation that Israel had: be different. Don't live like the nations of the world. Because it's in your difference that the nations of the world will now understand who God is. God is not a God like everybody else. God is different. God is the stranger among us, so to speak. His ways are different. So you've got to live like strangers too in this world. And this is my last point on the greatest threat to the faith in the Bible, Judaism and Christianity, is never persecution. It's never when you are threatened from the outside or put to jail. The greatest threat to Christianity and Judaism is assimilation. When you begin to blend in with the culture, you've pretty much destroyed the faith in that point. That's the danger. When we begin to blend in and we're imitating each other in our blending in, and we don't realize just how much we've compromised our faith.
I liked, again, your statement, you only live, like we all go, you only live once. And Gary, I think, addresses it in his book too, several times, about this isn't the only life we're living or we're leading. And I think that hits up, I mean, I never think about that I always think this is my one chance to get it right. And it's really not. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that towards the end you said something about if everybody was going to speak Latin in 10 years or 15 years, you'd start learning Latin, and drawing that parallel to, like, yeah, if we know we're going to have to live, the experience in heaven is going to be a certain way. Why not start learning now? Start learning to speak the language.
That's something that I've been thinking about more and more. Heaven is an objective reality. And what I mean by that is that it's not a projection of what we want it to be. It's going to be this way. Just like if I go to DC or Gastonia, it's not what I think it's going to be. It is what it is. Heaven is what it is. And heaven is a place where everything is radically conformed to Christ. Everyone in heaven will experience heaven as heaven because they too are radically conformed to Christ. And I think my point in that, I've got merit in our tradition. If you are a prideful, egotistical, greedy, selfish person, it cannot possibly be heaven for you. Why? You have not conformed yourself to the objective reality of heaven itself. And we want to be able to speak that language of heaven now. If you are someone who just does not want to worship God and praise God, well, that's all heaven is, everybody. It is the praise and worship of God. If you do not find that to be a part of your character now, can heaven possibly be heavenly for you? It's not a threat, because actually what it says is we have every opportunity right now to get ourselves prepared for that moment, so that when we stand before the presence of God in his heaven, which is an objective reality, which operates according to the values of Jesus, it will be wonderful and joyful. Does that make sense?
I don't want to get back on the C.S. Lewis thing, but it makes me think about that story where he talks about people riding the bus in heaven and they get off and it hurts their feet. It feels uncomfortable. And many people get back on the bus, back to hell, because it's comfortable there.
Yes. Yes. The great saints would say that God is a fire of love, just an intense, almost a ferocious fire. Now that's an analogy. We don't want to go too literal on that. But they liken, if you want to be in the fire, you've got to become like iron that's been in a flame. You know how the iron will begin to glow? It'll almost take on the same properties of the fire itself. Well, that's what we're trying to be in this life, to slowly immerse ourselves into the fire of God so that we burn at the same temperature as God, because that way the fire of God will not burn. We will have already become one with the fire of God, one with his love, and it will be an experience of great pleasure and delight and joy. I'm going off the deep end. My other analogy I've used for a youth group is like, and maybe I've used it on the podcast before, getting into a hot tub. You ever gotten into a hot tub? A really hot tub? Well, how do you get in it, Karen? How do you get in it?
One toe at a time.
Yeah, one toe. You have to go slowly. And if I were to pick you up and just plunge you into a hot tub, what would happen to you?
I would like overheat.
Yeah, you would burn. It would burn you. But someone who has slowly immersed herself into the hot tub, they become one with the temperature. It feels good. We don't want to be, maybe this is a silly analogy. We at death, we don't want to be plunged in the fire of God. Because if we are, God's love is just going to be too intense for us. It'll burn. It'll burn.
So what is this week's topic going to be about? Well, I know you write your sermons on Thursday, but I'm sure you've got ideas.
The topic this week, we're going a little bit deeper. I mean, if you're going to be conformed to Christ in this world, yes, you're going to be fully human. You're going to restore the image of God within yourself. You're going to have to live differently because the world is never going to naturally accept, oh, love of enemy. Okay, that's good. But then there's the other part that is a part of the consequences of imitating Christ. And Jesus speaks of this over and over again when he says things like, you're going to be hated if you follow me, if you take on my way. There is a cross-shaped existence to the Christian life. We have to be prepared for some suffering. And that pervades the Gospels. Jesus speaks about this all the time. It's all over the book of Acts, and it's all over the letters of the New Testament. Are you really positive you'll go all the way with this Lord? Because if you are, you're going to suffer some. Not because God delights in suffering, it's just you're going against that current. And it's hard. It's much easier to go the opposite way. So we're going to talk a little bit about the place of holy suffering, not like a cancer or sickness or anything else that we can't control. But this idea that I will voluntarily take upon myself this cross that the Lord is offering me, following his way despite the suffering involved. And I think that's a message that we in the church need to hear nowadays. We've lived with a very therapeutic understanding of the gospel. Well, it can be therapeutic, but remember, we're following someone who died, who was crucified. And are we willing to be crucified with him, so to speak? Yeah.
Not to take Shane's analogy about the fire too far, but it's in the Bible about the refining fire, and I think that's
it's everywhere.
So yeah, it will hurt, not for hurting's sake, but we're getting rid of these impurities. If we truly, that strong iron in the forge is strong because it's lost its the impurities have been heated out.
Yes. St. John of the Cross, he used the image of wood, like you put a wood on a fire that's fresh, like you just cut the wood. And you put it on this hot fire. Well, what happens to that wood? Well, it doesn't burn immediately. All of a sudden, all the impurities have to come out of it. The creatures start coming out of it. All these things start coming out of it. But after a period of time, that wood takes on the properties of the fire and it's as beautiful as the fire. And we love staring into a fire. That's the Christian life, everybody. That's what we want to be doing. We want God to purify us in this life. The impurities in us, the ego, the egocentrism, the selfishness, the vices within us, burn those away so that we become one with that fire.
And people will love to look at you in your life, just like we like.
They will love to look. They're perfect analogy. I have to steal that now.
I give you permission. You can have it. My gift to you.
I'll watch you burn.
Who said that?
Well, I think it's attributed to John Wesley. I don't think he said it. Somebody said that if you catch on fire, if you burn with the fire of God, people will walk for miles just to watch you burn.
Huh. I never knew that. Never heard that one.
Yeah. And the other one that we associate with John Wesley, but you can look this up, we have no record of him ever saying it, is the quote we associate with him: do all the good you can to all the people you can, to everyone you can, however you can. You know, he never said that. But it sounds like something John Wesley would say.
So we claim it.
No, we claim it. Yeah.
All right. Kevin, you mentioned confirmation earlier, and we do have another question from a confirmand, another student. And the question is, why do some people give up on God and become atheists after having once believed? And there was also another question similar: why do some people not believe in God? So have at it.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I haven't had much time to think about this, but I would say kind of goes back to what Shane said about a therapeutic understanding of God. This is kind of a pet issue for me. Having seen a bunch of youth come through this program, 70, 75 youth getting confirmed at years past. I think this year it's 36, something like that. And then, you know, they come back here and there. But I think the fault is on us sometimes as adults, presenting a God that's not compelling. That maybe we've not done a good job of showing a God who is worth following. That sounds very doom and gloom. I don't want to sound that way. But when we present I'm okay, you're okay, this sort of just do the right things, make the right decisions, and all is fine. It's kind of milk toast, white bread, mayonnaise kind of God. That's really nothing worth sticking around for.
Well, yeah, and not the fire either. I mean, that's not a
Right.
fire, that's not a God that has a ferocity in his love.
Now, I can't prove that, but I do have some research that shows that young people, that's, you know, they see us arguing about colors of carpet, you know, or, you know, just different things. That's not, you know, to your point earlier, Karen, we want more Christians in the church, but, you know, it's not like the church is a great place for people to follow Christ all the time. You know, a lot of times we get caught up on following the culture of the church too. So my hope is that we are able to learn how to present a God and Jesus who is countercultural and worth following. And I've been guilty of that too. You know, when you're just trying to get music ready for a Sunday service, there's not much time to present all these things. But I think we just have to be very careful. I take it very seriously.
I can't say it any better than that. I think it's we are not living differently as we're called to do. Therefore, we don't shimmer with the beauty of God within us. And people are, again, holiness is beautiful. If we're living a beautiful life, it can be appealing. Young people are not afraid to give everything up for something. They actually want that. They want to be able to just go boldly into something, to the renunciation of themselves. They like something that's hard, and we have not given, as Kevin said, a very compelling narrative. I would say poor evangelism on the church, where we don't have an urgency in our preaching anymore, that this is life and death. I mean, that's how the scriptures call it. You read the sermons of Peter and Paul in the book of Acts, they're not like, oh, everything's fine. You know, it's okay. You do your thing, I'll do my thing. And if you want to follow Jesus, that's fine too. No, they're saying, he is the Lord, and there are consequences for not following him, but there are even greater glorious things that'll happen if you do. I think it's also because we have reduced Christianity to ethics. I've talked about that before. We have reduced it to just being a good person. And then someone says, well, I don't really need a church to be a good person. Well, that's right. You don't. Whereas the scriptures talk about we're to be Christified and divinized. That's what this book is really about, dancing with the Holy Trinity. That's really the ultimate goal. I would say another thing that's really been strong is science, the rise of this kind of scientism where we think, well, science has got the corner on reason and rationality. Religion is all superstitious, and young people want to be rational. And so we think Christianity is for the dumb people, the simpletons who are not scientific. We have got to get past that. I've talked about that before. So those were some of the things that I would attribute to the rise of kind of unbelief in the church. And the last one would be the secularization of the culture. We live in a time now really unprecedented where there's literally no sense of transcendence, of anything beyond the material world. Charles Taylor, the philosopher, calls it the buffered self. We've kind of created a world now where it's just buffered from anything beyond it. And this has led to a kind of indifferentism when it comes to religion. Like, well, yeah, there's nothing beyond this life, so why bother? So I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
Well, I also think some of it with our youth, I mean, I'm sure it's not just youth related, it's all over the board, but I feel like with our youth, you know, your parents make you go to church, go to Sunday school, youth group, all that. And then when you get out on your own and you're in college and you're a young adult, it's kind of like your first time to really think about things. And even Gary talks about that in the book, that his daughter came back from college and was like, I'm questioning everything now. And
Karen, we are not preparing our young people for those kinds of encounters, and we should be. We should be, because the church has been thinking about every professor of college evil. I mean, you name it. The church has been thinking about those things for 2,000 years, and it has answers, but we're not sharing this with our kids. And so we're just sending them into the fire without any kind of flame retardant suit, and they're burned up. I mean, it's just, we've got to prepare our kids. We have a smart faith. There are responses to these professors, but this is such a common narrative.
yeah, but I also feel like it's everybody's journey as well, because I remember there was a time where I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But as I aged, and I think you kind of get drawn back into it. I think it's like your life cycles, that just because you fell out at some point in your life doesn't mean you're not going to come back. And obviously,
no, I mean, there's always hope. I mean, there's always, once you're baptized, God has got a claim on you. And even if your children fall away from the church, I was one of them, right? But my baptism, God's claim on me worked. I don't know how else to put it. And I did come back. But let's at least acknowledge that if we fall away from the church, we've lost something of ourselves. We've lost a part of our mission that we can't necessarily make up. But it doesn't mean there's no hope. So I'm with you there. We don't want our youth to fall away. I mean, let's let that be a goal.
Right.
But if they do, let's look within. Let's look within ourselves. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Karen, I mean, I think that's been the standard operating procedure of the church, what you just said, for many years, right? Like, well, they'll come back, they'll get married and have kids. Well, what we're seeing in the marriage rate among millennials and now Gen Z, they're putting off marriage, they're putting off having kids. And so if we're just sort of resting in the fact that, oh yeah, they'll show back up, then that may never happen. That's the old way. It may not be the new way. And so
yes, and a lot of that now we're swimming. We don't. What's the saying that if you want to know what the water's like, don't ask the fish swimming. Right. We're swimming in a pool of postmodernism. We just don't realize it. And postmodernism, if you narrow it down, whatever happened in the past is irrelevant. It was colonial. It was oppressive. And we live in a time where the subjective self, the I, me, takes precedent over everything. And now we're living in a time where personal experience is now the arbiter of all truth. And if I don't feel like being religious, okay. Yeah, I believe Jesus is the Messiah. Well, what do you think? I disagree. Oh, okay. So we're also living in this subjective water where my experience or my view of the world is the correct view. So it's kind of a relativism of truth where we're living in a time now, which has profound implications on how we view religion and religious conviction.
I've read some things saying we're actually in post-truth society now.
Post-truth, that's right. There is no truth. That's right.
There's no truth.
Of course, to say that there's no truth is an absolute claim that there is a truth called no truth. You can't get around it. So it's a contradiction in and of itself. You know, when I said this to once, I was one of my interlocutors I was debating with, all truth is relative. And I said,
what word was that? I'm sorry, what word?
Interlocutor. My opponent, my argument opponent. And well, all truth is relative. And I said, well, is that an absolute claim? Are you absolutely sure that all truth is relative? You can't get away from it.
I learned a new word today. Thank you, Shane.
Well, I told you these confirmands have good questions, and
Sure.
hopefully, we're answering them for them as well. Yeah, we have been emailing Diane and Shane these questions. I don't think Diane emailed this one to you. I think she said she would take care of this one, but we do share it with the confirmands, so they are getting answers to their questions, which are good. So.
Yes, and I want the kids to constantly ask these questions. We should be thinking about these questions already. The best way to de-evangelize a young person, the best way to turn an aspiring young Christian into a non-believer is just to say to their questions, well, just believe. That's just not going to cut it. That's how you de-evangelize someone. So get involved. Understand the history of the church. The church has wrestled with every question these kids are ever going to ask us, and there are good answers to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say if you're a parent or a grandparent, or don't be afraid of those questions either. If you don't know the answer, don't be embarrassed. Look it up. Talk to Shane or me or anybody on staff that you feel this connection with.
Yeah, listen to the podcast.
I mean, yeah, I should say that too, I guess. But that's what I've seen before. It's just parents sort of, well, I don't know. I don't feel strong enough in my faith. And don't be embarrassed about that. Walk that road with your kid.
Right. And look at that as an opportunity as a parent. Now I can grow in my faith along with my youth. We should always be advancing in the spiritual life. I will mention that again, but that is the trajectory. The normal course of holiness is growth. That's normal. And there's no such thing in the interior life as just kind of a flatlining. You're either advancing or you are regressing. And we must always be striving to advance.
Well, always a great conversation with you guys, and new words learned every day or every time. Thanks, Shane, for that one.
Interlocutor. Look it up.
I honestly thought you said interocular, like in the eye. I was like,
I don't have any church announcements really for this week. Ash Wednesday is February 17th, and there'll be a 7 o'clock service that you can register to attend.
Okay, well, let me say this since you're on the subject for all the listeners. Think about what you're going to give up for Lent and make it hard. I will speak a little bit more about that, I think, on Sunday. Don't let the season of Lent pass you by. And I want everybody to be thinking about, seriously, got to give something up. This is actually a part of our imitation of Christ, especially the imitation of Christ on the cross. So I want everybody to be thinking about that, including Kevin, including you, Karen, including myself. And don't say, well, I'm just going to add something to my plate. No, because that's saying, I'm just going to enjoy my life the way I like it now and maybe do what? No. Give up something that's tough. God will bless you. God is going to bless you if you do that.
You're not thinking chocolate, right? You want something harder than chocolate?
I want something harder than chocolate.
Okay.
I usually give up.
Make it difficult.
I usually give up social media. I've done that for the last few years.
Difficult for you?
In the beginning, yeah, but I think I need to up my game a little bit, because what I find after I give up social media is how quiet and peaceful my life is. Like, I don't feel like I have this, these buzzing in my head. So I kind of feel like it's hard, but I can do it. I need a harder challenge.
Yep. So just think about that and up your game. The only thing God wants to do is bless you when we do something like that. And when we do something that's difficult, we learn something about ourselves. We learn about how addicted we are to something. But we also realize, wow, God is faithful in mighty ways.
Yeah. Okay, so people start thinking about that. We should have them share with us some of the things that they're going to give up.
Yeah.
Some ideas. So, all right, guys. Well, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. And for everybody else who's listening, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.